tempat ini dalam rangka berkumpul untuk sama-sama merayakan Hari Sumpah Pemuda. Kemudian juga selain itu tentu seperti yang tadi Mbak Andini sampaikan, ALUMNAS juga bertepatan ulang tahun ke-40 pada hari ini. Jadi congratulations to all of my Alumnasian, and I'm very grateful to be welcome all of you. My name is Gani, saya Ketua Umum ALUMNAS. Tentunya saya mengaturkan selamat datang kepada semua dalam webinar hari ini yang bertemakan Road to COP26 Glasgow. Pada tanggal 8 April 2021 kemarin, ALUMNAS mendapatkan satu susunan daripada kepengurusan baru, yang mana tanggal 8 April itu kita tandai dengan satu inaugurasi di Meikarta Cikarang dengan tema Advancing the Nation. And since then, it has been 6 months. So this October marks the 6th month of our kepengurusan. And for that, allow me to thank all the pengurus for having been so active in ensuring that ALUMNAS plays a role in advancing the nation. Untuk itu, sebelum saya lanjutkan, perkenankan saya untuk memberikan sedikit footage mengenai what we have done in the last 6 months. And actually before the inauguration, we had some preparation. So let me play this video just to show you a taste of what has transpired over the last 6 months with ALUMNAS. And so we started with roadshows to Pak Menhukam, to Ambassador Sung Kim, to ensure that the kepengurusan will be formed in such a way that it will make a strong ALUMNAS for the next 5 years. So we went to different people, including the several ministers, several former ministers, and lastly, we got the okay to sign the anggaran dasar, akte notaris, and then Zoom. We gercep, gerakan cepat. We straight away made quite a number of events, mostly virtual at that time because we didn't have the luxury of having offline events. Seperti yang kita lihat di sini, kita ada calling for volunteers. Kita lakukan several webinars, which quite a number of people joined. We also have some religious events with Prof. Nazarudin on Easter. We also were active in health issues, in education issues, in jobs issues, digitalization issues, and we also have FGDs throughout these 6 months. And if you can see here, this is our inauguration ceremony back in April 8th of 2021, and we had a hybrid event where our chairman of the advisory board, Pak Menteri Yosana Lauli, also at that time Pak Menteri Bambang Brojonegoro were present. We had a limited amount of people so that we can actually uphold the protokol kesehatan. But we had a bash at that time. We had a big also inauguration, while also limited because of the hybrid situation, the pandemic. But straight on, after that, just a week later, we started to work, and then we had met the Minister of Dalam Negeri, General Tito Karnavian, and started to donate 1 million masks to all over Indonesia. This is in Lombok. And then also we had charity programs. During Ramadan, for example, we went to 8 to 10 panti asuhan, panti reda, working together to deliver these donations from our esteemed members of the ALUMNAS. And you see here also, we'd like to have healthy events. So we had sporting events, which will hopefully continue after this. And nggak lupa juga kita have gathering, for example, during buka puasa. Of course, we couldn't have a big gathering, so we have less than 100 people gathering in a place to celebrate the iftar during Ramadan this year. Now we are also venturing into businesses. So a number of ALUMNAS members went to Deputy Minister and also open up a farm. This is the farm that we have worked on the last few weeks, and now it's starting to grow, and hopefully we will be harvesting this weekend spinach. So the pilot project is only 1 hectare, but it's going to be exciting because hopefully this is a good start for our theme of advancing the nation. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's just a taste of what we have done in the last 6 months. Tentunya ALUMNAS merasa perlu untuk terus melakukan kontribusi dalam rangka advancing the nation. We have done several FGDs thus far. Yang pertama, Future of Jobs, Digitalization and Education di bulan Mei tanggal 27, and then pembangunan infrastruktur yang efisien, inklusif, hijau dan berkelanjutan pada tanggal 10 Juni. 2 hari yang lalu kita juga berbicara mengenai langkah aksi nyata Indonesia dalam menangani dampak perubahan iklim secara berkelanjutan. And we had great panels of discussions where we hope to come up with white papers for those FGD and then put them together di dalam buku Bunga Rampai. And today we have this webinar, dan harapan kita adalah this leads to a good number of white papers that we can bring to our upcoming exciting event, Alumnus Summit, which will be held on 24th to 25th November. Karena kondisi yang memang belum memungkinkan untuk kita gather semua anggota ALUMNAS, yang kalau kita kumpulkan sebetulnya potentially we have more than 100,000 US alumni yang aktif beberapa tahun ini, mungkin kurang lebih 2.000, dan since 6 months ago we have actually tried to put them into database yang kita harapkan teman-teman alumni Amerika Serikat sendiri yang mengisi, sehingga we have over 600 people registered by name, by address, by email, by occupation, by hobby, and so on, so that we can work with these 600 genuine members of ALUMNAS to advance the nation. Bapak-bapak, ibu-ibu hadirin sekalian, sekali lagi saya mengucapkan terima kasih atas partisipasi bapak-bapak dan ibu-ibu, bukan aja pada hari ini, tapi juga throughout the last 6 months when we have the activities. Dan we will continue to have these activities, whether it is offline and online, and hopefully you all will join us to in our quest to advance the nation. Demikian sambutan dari kami. Wabillahi taufik wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Semangat pagi.
Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Pak Jimmy. Selanjutnya remarks by recently inaugurated Indonesian ambassador to the US, His Excellency Bapak Roeslani. Pak Rosan, silakan. The screen is yours.
Thank you, Ibu Andini. Well, very good morning to all of you. Thank you, ALUMNAS. Thank you, Pak Jimmy Gani, for your kind invitation for me to speak on these timely and important topics. Road to COP26, Glasgow, particularly on Indonesia and US cooperation on climate change. Let me greet, I see a lot of familiar faces here. Pak Suahasil, Vice Minister of Finance, ada Pak Cyril, and then Pak Jaya, and other panelists and my fellow alumnations. Currently, we are at risk. Changing climate is a beyond doubt existential threat to humanity. Mainstreaming climate changes in the policy is not an option, it is a necessity. It can save us and lead to better and quality growth at the same time. Fortunately, tackling climate change is not only a major challenge, but also a significant economic opportunity. This is precisely why the challenge of climate change must be addressed together globally. And one of the most critical opportunity for the collaboration is the next COP26 in Glasgow. In that context, I would like to convey 3 key messages on Indonesia's contribution to COP26. First, on Indonesia's achievement to combat climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia now is certainly a better compared to 20 years ago. This includes ecosystem and environmental protection and management. In 2020, we recorded the lowest deforestation rate for the past 20 years. We experienced 82% fewer forest fires in 2020 compared to 2019. Indonesia total forest fire area was less than half of the raging in Europe, Australia, or the United States. Indonesia forest conservation is 66 million hectares, which is larger than the total area of the United Kingdom and Norway combined. Indonesia is on the track in its deforestation efforts. We are also making progress in financial instruments to enable climate action. Indonesia has started climate budget tagging since 2016 at the national level, and recently we have started to implement CBT in 11 local government. In addition, Indonesia will soon have the regulation, infrastructure, and mechanism on carbon trading to address emission reduction in forestry, energy, and transportation. On international cooperation, one of the lessons of the recently terminated LOI on REDD+ between Indonesia and Norway is the partnership for climate must be based on equality, both supporting the interests of the developed and developing world. Failure to find the balance and failure to deliver the promises and pledge to support climate action in the developing world is not an option. Second, Indonesia and the United States leadership toward the net zero carbon emission. We applaud the United States leadership toward net zero carbon emission, in particular the US ambitious commitment to reduce emission by 50 to 52% from 2005 levels by 2030, to achieve zero emission electricity in 2035, with a target of 50% of all vehicles powered by electricity in the US by 2035, to increase the government annual climate finance budget for developing countries by secondfold and 3 times for climate adaptation financing by 2024, and encourage the realization of 100 billion annual climate finance commitment from the developed countries, and conduct effort to strengthen investment in the US climate and energy resilience infrastructure sectors. It does clear that Indonesia and United States climate action are both bold, ambitious, and contribute to the global climate target. In that respect, there are significant economic opportunities for Indonesia and the US that can be realized when we carefully plan for our future climate collaboration. I would not pretend that I have the plan here today, but let me offer some thought for all of us. For alumni to ponder and find ways to realize. This brings me to my third and last point. Third, opportunity and way forward. Sustaining and leveraging international cooperation for climate action. As a member of the G20, Major Economic Forum, APEC, and other global forum, Indonesia and the US can advocate and push for balanced climate policies that take into full account interests of both developed and developing world. These include the principle of multilateralism in environmental sectors such as common but differentiated responsibilities, the balance between climate objective and the SDGs, respect the national capabilities and policies, reject the one-size-fits-all approach, discrimination, and the use of climate change issues as disguised protectionism. Partnership and energy transition, both the government and the private sector of the US and Indonesia can play a major role to support Indonesian plan to boost the contribution of renewable energy in the nation energy mix. Cooperation can be targeted toward the development of EV industry ecosystem and pilot net zero area, as well as development and investment in renewable energy infrastructure. Implementing innovative and realistic financing for climate action and energy transition, as well as the debt solution for countries in need of international solidarity. Building and sustaining trust between developed and developing countries in relation to this contribution of large economies of financing climate change and mobilization of resources. Game-changing incentive to boost private investment, support the use of renewable energy, development of technological innovation to support energy efficiency, capacity, and building technological transfer. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow alumnus, Indonesia renewed ambition to enshrine in Indonesia long-term strategy for carbon and energy 2050 is updated nationally determined contribution to achieve net zero emission by 2060. Indonesia will introduce both documents during the 26th session of Conference of the Parties of the United Nations Framework Conference on the Climate Change in Glasgow in November. The strategy needs to be support of all stakeholders in Indonesia, including my fellow alumnus and their respective institutions and businesses. It also needs the collaboration of our international partners, including the United States. Achieving environmental and climate goals indeed doesn't come easy and accessibly for most of us. That is why international cooperation is vital, and the contribution from alumnus to support this is very welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. Again, congratulations, and we'll see you in DC. Next is our keynote speaker, Honorary Suahasil Nazara, the Vice Minister of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia. Pak Sua, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much. A very good morning to all of you. First, I would like to greet Excellency Roeslani, the Indonesian Ambassador designate to the United States of America. Congratulations on your appointment, Excellency. I also would like to greet the alumnus, Pak Gani, with all of the alumnus activists, if I may call you all the alumnus activists, and also representative from the U.S. Embassy, Ambassador, and also Mr. Douglas Midland, Head of International Development Finance Corporation, IDFC in Indonesia, speakers, Pak Cyril, and also other speakers, and distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to speak before you all in this very bright morning, at least in Jakarta, and I would like to provide appreciation to the alumnus who is holding this event and invited me to join this web seminar. It is my pleasure to see you all this morning, and I'm also impressed by Pak Gani's videos earlier showing the activities of alumnus. I think it's very, very hectic as well as very, very productive and spreading out a lot of positivities to the environment and also to the economy as a whole. This morning, I was told that the theme is the road to Glasgow, Indonesia's contribution to the COP26, which is going to take place in a few days ahead of us. And I know that this is very fascinating, and this is and at the same however at the same time we are also trying to cope with the pandemic. These are two items which probably is very historical. We have to handle the climate change to the future, and at the same time we have to handle the virus. This is very historical. This is the challenge of our lifetime. This kind of challenge is probably not gonna take place again very soon. I think it is going to continue, and we hope that we will be able to handle both of these issues. but I'm very glad to see about the COVID-19 pandemic in Indonesia, especially where the infections is decreasing, and we really hope that we will be able to maintain the low infection rate, which is low positive rates, which we have already seen like a month or so. Of course, it is very important to maintain the health protocols. It is very important to make sure that we all get the vaccinations in due time, and we also continue at the same time continue our economic activities in order to continue the improving the prosperity and also for the better Indonesia. A lot of economic data shows the recovery, and we really hope that we will be able to finish 2021 this year and entering 2022 next year with a lot of optimism, and at the same time maintaining all the health protocols, vaccinations, the readiness of our health sector in order to handle the COVID-19 pandemic, which I think going to continue, and I think at some point it will become an endemic, which means we're going to live with the virus. The virus is still going to be with us. It is not going to go away, but we must be able to handle the virus in a smart way. Maintain the health protocols, live a very healthy life, and at the same time maintaining our vaccination. Now, in the middle of that situation, we do not forget our medium term and long term issue, which is the climate change. And this is very, very encouraging. Despite the fact that we are facing the short term, if I may call it the short term issue of COVID-19, the pandemic, which is not really short term, but let me call it like if we can handle it in the now, we still do not forget that we have a climate change challenge in the for the medium and long term, and this is encouraging. And Indonesia is, I can tell you that Indonesia is very much in the middle of that, because we commit to the Paris Agreement, and the Paris Agreement says that Indonesia will reduce our carbon emissions by 41% with the international supports and 29% with our own effort, with our own resources. And this is not only a matter of talking. We walk the talk, and I would like to tell you what are the how do we walk the talk for that Paris Agreement. We started with the logic of what can the government provide. What kind of government support that we can provide to mitigate, to get to the Paris Agreement. Paris Agreement is basically about reducing carbon emissions. And first of all, of course, it is very important that the government provides the support. What kind of supports that are provided by the government? The government of Indonesia, and especially the Indonesian budget, have already provided a number of tax facilities for the green economy. We provide lower tax for the electric car. We provide lower tax for the hybrid car and for the full battery car. We encourage the production of electric car in Indonesia. We understand that in the beginning, it requires support in terms of the tax facilities, and we provide that. And I believe that ALUMNAS fellow who are working in a number of tax consultant or business consultant can address to that. Maybe later can also be discussed during the panel discussion. The government also spending a number of money, some amount of money through many different ministries and institutions and government institutions. All of that are provided and recorded and reported in what is called the budget tagging report that was previously referred to by Ambassador Roeslani. Since 2016, the Badan Kebijakan Fiskal, Ministry of Finance, provides the annual report on budget tagging, providing how much money that the government spent from the APBN on green issues activity, on activities that are related to green issues. If you would like to look at that publication, please go to the Ministry of Finance or Badan Kebijakan Fiskal website. You can find it there, budget tagging report. Now, it is not only about spending. The government support is not only about the spending. The government also support the green economy by making sure that the government can promote the financing in a green format. Indonesia, I can tell you, is the first country. Indonesia is the first sovereign country that issued what is currently known in the international investor as green sukuk bonds. It turns out that the sukuk, which is an Islamic bonds, can be combined very well with the green, because both of them have the similar format, meaning that sukuk is a bond format that require underlying assets, and green is also requires underlying assets. Of course, for the green, the underlying assets must be green in nature, and we provide that. And Indonesia is the first country, and right now is recognized as a very active issuer in the international fora, among the international investors, our green sukuk bonds. Indonesia has also just recently this year issued what is in the international fora is called SDG bonds, Sustainable Development Goals bonds. We issued the SDG bonds. And how these green sukuk and SDG bonds are different from the regular, the conventional bonds? They are different because if we issued green bonds or we issued SDG bonds, then we must report to our investors what kind of green achievements and what kind of SDG achievements that we get in order for the bonds to be continue to be maintained. This is completely different from the regular or conventional bonds. Conventional bonds is just a matter of borrowing money, issuing the bonds and borrowing the money and no report to the investors. But for the green and SDG, we have to report back to all of our investors that the money is actually used for the green activities, for the SDG supporting activities, and that kind of report is made annually. Now, we are very proud of that. And I really hope that Indonesians can also be proud of the fact that the Republic of Indonesia is an active issuer of SDG bonds as well as the green bonds. But I can tell you one thing, as much as we are proud that we are supporting the international agenda of going green and going on sustainable development goals, I can also tell you we have not seen that green or SDG bonds actually of lower cost to the government. The cost is still similar to the conventional bonds. Now, I believe if the international community would like to help Indonesia, if the international investors community would like to help countries like Indonesia, would like to help the developing countries like Indonesia to go green, to go SDG, then international financing is one way to go about it. Let the developing countries like Indonesia issue the bonds, but at the lower cost, lower coupon. We have not seen it, but still the Republic of Indonesia, we believe in green and SDG. We continue to issue, but at the same time, we keep on telling the international community, we need your support. And your support can take a form of lower coupon for countries who are promoting green and SDG. So that is one thing. The government support will continue despite the fact that we are handling the COVID-19. We are continuing with the government support, as I mentioned earlier, the tax facilities, the government spending, the government financing will continue to be there in our budget. Now, on the international fora, Indonesia is very active in the international fora in order to not only to show that Indonesia is very committed to green and SDG goals, but also to show that we would like to engage the more developed countries in order to help countries like Indonesia in order to go green. That is why Indonesia currently is we are co-chairing the ministers of finance for climate action. So right now in the international fora, climate action has a coalition of ministers of finance. A number of ministers of finance from a number of countries is part of this coalition. And the coalition continue to discuss how can the finance ministers from each country can help pushing through the climate action in the world. So climate action is not only about the ministers of environment, Ibu Siti Nurbaya, who is very, very active in the international fora. Ministers of finance right now around the world form a kind of coalition, and they continue to discuss how can the Ministry of Finance can continue to have the climate action. Of course, we continue to discuss what I mentioned earlier, the tax facilities, government spending, the government financing, and of course, this is something that we continue to participate. In the G20, which is the member of G20 is the 20 biggest economies around the world. There is what is called the Sustainable Finance Working Group. And the Sustainable Finance Working Group continue to discuss about finding the right formula for concrete actions in order to have the G20, the 20 largest economy, to make significant progress toward the climate change. And this is also continue to happen. And this is something that Indonesia as a member of a G20 is very actively participating. So we hope that all of this action will continue. This is not only one ministry, this is not only one sector, this is a multi-sectoral approach from the government side in order to participate in the international fora. And we really hope that the next G20 summit, which is going to take place in Rome in a few days, will discuss about the sustainable financing, international sustainable financing, and at the same time, the Glasgow, the COP26, which is a few days after that, will also be a venue where the climate change is discussed at the international level. Now, I think you may think that it is very far from us and very abstract. Now let me now let me go to the next part, which is my last part, about what is really in action. What is really in action? What is really something that we would like to see in Indonesia? When, ladies and gentlemen and fellow alumnus, when you are asking about what is next for Indonesia, what is really something that we can see in Indonesia, I should tell you that if we are talking about what's next, it is very important to understand that Indonesia is not starting from point zero. We are not starting from a clean sheet of paper. The fact is that if we are looking at emission reduction, 29% by our own effort and 41% with the international contribution, it is very important to further distribute the emission reduction into sectors. Which sectors that actually contribute to the emission reduction? I can tell you that a number of research have already showed us more than 1/3, maybe around 35–38% of the emissions, of the carbon emissions, should be reduced from the energy sector. And what is that? And that is our electricity. Electricity, a lot of our electricity are now generated by coal or by diesel fuel. We are still relying on fossil fuel for our electricity. And that is one single sector that is very, very high that we have to focus in order to reduce our carbon emission. How to do that? It is important to understand that the coal generating plant have already a number of contracts with the government of Indonesia, typically represented by our PLN. It is very important then to strike the right balance. How to shut down the coal plant, but not jeopardizing our business climate. How to strike the right balance. And for that effort, of course, we know that somebody has to pay the cost. There is some cost associated. If the coal plant is shut down and the contract is actually still effective, it is a matter of business calculation. How much compensation that we have to provide. It is not only about building new renewables plant, it is also about handling and taking care our business climate because we have past contracts. So that is why right now we are talking about what we call the Energy Transition Mechanism Scheme, ETM scheme. ETM scheme is a scheme where the design basically is an early retirement of fossil fuel based electricity plant, early retirement, which means they probably still have 20 years ahead of contract, but can we retire them early with certain amount of compensation, and at the same time offering the economy to build the renewable plant in order to replace the coal plant that are early retired. These are all business calculation. Ambassador Roeslani earlier mentioned about this should be very attractive for the business community, but we have to find the right balance. How to make sure that we can change our coal plant into the renewable. Now, again, I would like to remind us all that we are not starting from point zero. Right now, because of the COVID-19, the demand for electricity is going down south, is reduced. We are in the situation where the energy is an oversupply. It is very important to conduct the calculation smartly in order to make sure that the electricity can contribute to the carbon emission, and at the same time we can go with the transition toward a more renewable energy. And for that effect, the other government support that has just been approved by our parliament is the topic of carbon tax. And the carbon tax already been approved by our parliament, and this is very, very historical for Indonesia. Not all countries in the world are able to put in place what is called the carbon tax, but we are very grateful that our parliament agrees to that, and that shows how our long-term vision has already been put in place in the very important milestone of approval of the carbon tax. Let me make a stress here. Carbon tax is not a tax on emission. Our carbon tax is designed on the format of what is known in the international literature and international practice as a cap and trade and tax. If we have a target about reduction of carbon emission, then that target should be translated into sectoral target, which means that a certain sector should only emit certain degree of emission, and that is the cap, the standard, the cap. If any firm issuing carbon above the cap, that means the firm must compensate. They can compensate from buying the carbon credit from other company who is emitting less than cap, or they can pay the tax to the government. So carbon tax is designed in that structure, which is called the cap and trade and tax. Some of you may be interested in finding out further about this mechanism, and I think the Ministry of Finance, we are very happy to provide you with the discussion about the system and how that can be put in place. A lot is going on, and I think a lot are going to come up in our road or in our journey about the climate change. Road to Glasgow is not going to stop only in Glasgow. The road to Glasgow is only one step. And I really hope that in Glasgow, the international community can really put in place, can put a pledge that is really helping the developing countries like Indonesia. There is no way that Indonesia will handle the climate change issue, reduction of our coal plant by ourselves. It is very expensive. It is very expensive. I think some of you probably already heard or read in the newspapers that in order for Indonesia to handle the coal plant, we require no less than 3,500 trillion Indonesian rupiah. Let me repeat this in bahasa Indonesia. 3.500 triliun rupiah. It is not a small amount of money. We need all efforts. We need all forces that can help us. Of course, budget will be part of that cost. Budget will be part of that. Budget means taxpayers' money. Taxpayers' money will be part of that cost. International support is more than expected, and we hope Glasgow can be a milestone where the international contribution can really be materialized, can be a stepping stone. We are continue to hope, we are continuing to do our best, and we are going to continue to provide our ambitions. We are going to continue to provide Indonesian ambitions toward better climate change in the world. This is going to be Indonesia's contribution, not only to the COP26, but Indonesia's contribution to the humanity, because the climate change is all the humanity problem. Thank you very much once again. I hope you have fruitful discussions today about the climate change and how Indonesia is playing part on that. wish you all healthy and safe throughout this pandemic. I really hope that one day alumnus can have face-to-face meeting, big seminars, and you all can gather and do reunion and discuss in the more live about other topic as well. Thank you very much for inviting me, and have a good day, everyone. So back to you, Bu Andini. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Pak Sua. Terima kasih banyak atas waktunya dan juga informasinya. Thank you very much. Before we begin our discussion, I would like to ask everyone, terutama buat teman-teman yang bergabung melalui Zoom, ini kita akan menggunakan chat box. We will use the chat box as a section for comments or a share of thought throughout the discussion, and also question. So I still see here some of you, I know you haven't seen each other physically for a while, so you would like to say hi. I don't mind that, but just to, I have to maintain the traffic of communication, whether it's on type or verbally. So kindly, I would like to ask Bapak Ibu sekalian, saya mohon digunakan chat ini hanya untuk pertanyaan, komen, sharing thoughts, jangan untuk menyapa dulu, paling enggak untuk 1,5 jam ke depan. Mohon sekali. Ya, terima kasih banyak atas kerjasamanya dan pengertiannya. Dan ini sebenarnya acaranya juga disiarkan di YouTube, tapi tadi saya cek nih, Pak Jimmy, mungkin boleh dicek ke timnya, tidak ada acaranya di YouTube-nya.
Ya.
Jadi pasti banyak orang-orang yang pengen nonton di YouTube dan pengen taruh komen, karena pasti ada yang mau nggak bisa masuk nih ke dalam Zoom ini, jadi mereka dilempar ke YouTube semuanya. Dan terima kasih Pak Jimmy. Kita akan langsung saja, we will start the discussion. We have a very insightful, resourceful speakers who are joining us this morning. Yang pertama adalah Pak Cyril Noerhadi, member of Supervisory Board, Indonesia Investment Authority. Pagi Pak Cyril.
Selamat pagi.
Oke, baik. Selamat pagi. And then we have Douglas Midland, Head of International Development Finance Corporation in Indonesia. Pagi Pak Douglas. Can you hear me well? Hi Pak Douglas. Doug, can you hear me? I know you're here, but I don't think we can hear you. Okay, as long as you're here, I'm fine. So and next we have Sandy Lien, Environment, Science, Technology, and Health Unit Chief from the U.S. Embassy. I saw also Sandy is already here. Hi, Sandy.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. Selamat pagi semua.
Good morning. And also Pak Jaya Wahono, CEO of Clean Power Indonesia. Pak Jaya ada di sini juga.
Selamat pagi, Andini.
Selamat pagi. Pak Jaya has already submitted a lot of questions. So what I would like to have from this discussion, I wanted to have a fluid discussion, yeah? So each speaker can comment or answer or just anything, just we don't have a structure, a rigid structure in this discussion. I want it to be more fluid. So everyone can jump in and can comment, and make it as we say in Bahasa, berfaedah, fruitful or insightful, okay? So we want to talk about how can the US and Indonesia can collaborate on climate change leading up to COP26. We have Biden in the House, who is very much care about climate change, although it was killed in the Senate. However, how can we move forward? And by moving forward, we need to do something in the country first, right? In order to work together. So what can we do to make this collaboration happen with what's going on domestically? I'll share the question to, I guess, Sandy. Sandy, you can jump in first, and then Pak Cyril, and then Douglas.
Well, I actually, thank you. Andini, but actually, I guess before I start, I wanted to ask if there are ground rules for this forum panel, i.e. would there be Chatham House rules apply for the discussions so that people can feel more freely to speak, or is everything for attribution? I guess since it's live stream, now that I'm asking, I guess, so this is a totally open forum.
Correct. This is an open forum. Correct. Yeah. So that is my question. I guess from Doug or Sandy, you can start from the US side, and then Pak Cyril, you can share the perspective from Indonesia.
Sure.
Yeah. Doug, you want to start?
Sure, happy to. And can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay,
Loud.
perfect. Perfect. Well, selamat pagi. Sorry for the technical difficulties at the start. May I start by just saying thank you to Pak Jimmy and giving me this opportunity to join such a distinguished panel discussion and utilize this stage to speak on DFC as well as some of our approach and our insights, right?
We lost you again, Doug. We lost you again. You just unmuted yourself.
Am I back?
Yes, you're back.
Rough start to the morning, but no, thank you for the question. As introduced, my name is Doug Midland, Managing Director for the DFC in Jakarta. And it's a new office for us, right? So I think by answering the question, it's a good one. Just want to highlight the fact that DFC is a relatively new agency, but we're built on our predecessor agency, the Overseas Private Investment Corporation. And with strong bipartisan support in the United States Senate and House, the DFC was created, and our capacity to invest was over doubled, right? So we were moved from basically an investment cap of 30 billion to 60 billion, and this is for a global portfolio. And in addition to that, we were given new tools such as equity authority, additional flexibilities, including removing our requirement for U.S. Private sector involvement in a transaction. And all of that was really with an intent to expand our capabilities to support developmental projects in emerging market countries. And the other thing that I want to highlight is it's very unusual for the DFC to have offices in abroad. Prior to really just the past year, we really only had 3 offices, and each of those are really ad hoc. It was not an organized deployment of investment officers to various markets to really build our pipeline and ultimately our exposure. And so I want to highlight that just because as of today, we have 5 representative offices globally. Still a small number, but an impressive aspect of that is 4 of those are in this region. And I'll end by saying, well, one, I'm honored to be the person representing DFC in Indonesia, but on top of that, it's the one office that has a single country focus. That is representative of the opportunities to support investment in Indonesia and its recognition of the size of the economy and the fact that DFC is committed to building a pipeline of impressive projects here in Indonesia and ultimately our exposure. Maybe before I pass the mic over to some of my colleagues on the panel today, I just want to provide a quick snapshot of our approach. And for those of you that don't know who DFC is, we're the US government's development bank. So our mandate is to support local economic growth, and we do so by partnering with the private sector to support projects that are commercially viable and adhere to international standards on environmental, social impact, and worker rights. So we can touch on climate change, on subsequent questions, and as a development bank and policy driven, climate change is at the heart of our approach in terms of business development and how we're approaching support for projects in Indonesia. I'll hand over the mic for right now. I've probably taken up too much time, but thank you for having me.
Sandy, how can we collaborate on climate change?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. And I wanted to, this is a great question to start. And I think to echo what my colleague Doug just said, it cannot be emphasized enough how important Indonesia is as a country for the United States when it comes to partnership in climate and climate finance. Just like how Doug said that Indonesia is the sole country that has a single country representative for the DFC, Indonesia is also, until now, the only country in which the United States has established a formal bilateral climate change working group. And this was started in early 2021 of this year. So here in Indonesia, the U.S. Embassy and the government of Indonesia, we have established a formal bilateral U.S.-Indonesia climate change working group. On the United States side, it is headed up by our Deputy Special Presidential Envoy for Climate Change, Jonathan Pershing. And on the Indonesian side, is chaired by Vice Foreign Minister Mahinda Shurigar. And so this is our representation of how we are intensively engaged together to raise our collective climate ambitions. And so under this very formal bilateral working group structure, we have 4 task forces that were established that were organized around key climate change issues. The first being greenhouse gas emissions reduction. The second task force is focused on natural ecosystem and land use and marine. The third is focused on renewable energy transition. And the fourth task force is on climate finance. And so these task force and working group have met regularly throughout at a high level throughout the year to discuss how we can move together the climate ambitions. And in doing so, our close partnership within the bilateral climate working group and task force has been a key element in building trust and rapport with the government of Indonesia. And we have thus seen positive movement forward. I know Doug and others on the line have participated in task force meetings throughout the year. And so, and then I also just want to add, in addition to this formal bilateral working group that was established this year, even well before, and now I'm talking going back 10 plus years, the US have always been here and working and cooperating with Indonesia on climate. For example, through our partnership with the Tropical Forest Conservation Act program, we have successfully worked together over the last 10, 15 years on protection and conservation of forests and biodiversity in Indonesia, specifically in Sumatra and Kalimantan. So it is the cooperation on climate and environment has always been there. I think with the renewed focus with the Biden administration, we have now thought to formalize it around a formal structure. That's it for now.
Cyril, how can we double up that size of cooperation, I guess, between Indonesia and the US?
Thank you, Andini, for the opportunity. I guess very good question to start on how to actually collaborate for the climate change and double it up actually. Let me start with, of course, congratulate the ALUMNAS for, the new energetic and dynamic, organizing committee appointed in this April, and, this very good, active, and since April this year. So I think that's really good. Congratulations. And of course, congratulations for this 40th alumni and for the event today. So thank you for inviting me as well in this, very interesting panel discussion on the topic actually Road to COP26 Glasgow. Now, I think it's also good to have the opening speech was given by His Excellency Mr. Rosan, the ambassador, and of course, Pak Suahasil, the Vice Minister of Finance, that gives a clarity of what Indonesian government has done, in fact, aiming to achieve the milestones. Now, of course, there are several milestones here. If we look at 2030 milestone, 2045 milestone for our 100th year independence for Indonesia, but also 2060 that, net zero carbon emission. Now, what context I would say as the Supervisory Board of Indonesia Investment Authority. Now, the question is, what's INA? Because of INA, Indonesian Investment Authority is a new organization. I would start maybe 5 minutes about talking about INA. INA is actually Sovereign Wealth Fund of Indonesia version. The Sovereign Wealth Fund that was set up by law, the Omnibus Law in 2020 that was promulgated by the government of Indonesia. Of the law, there are Chapter 10 establishing INA, the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Indonesia, that actually to attract the foreign investment into Indonesia. Maybe the question, why is there a need of Sovereign Wealth Fund, Indonesian version? And there are a couple problems or issues as the starting point. Number one is the significant increase of infrastructures development and also still a need of big fund for developing or continuing development of infrastructures. These infrastructures can be, transportations, airport, seaport, energy, renewable energy, you name it, all the infrastructures. That's definitely need a lot of funding. Number two, of course, we look at the last couple of years, the direct investment in Indonesia. This is not portfolio investment that comes into the stock exchange or buying public fixed income or credits. It's not that significantly increased. So we would attract the foreign direct investment into Indonesia. That's number two. Number three, we look at the last 5 years, also infrastructure development was done by state enterprise that makes the financial profile of that state enterprise needs to be restructured. So Sovereign Wealth Fund would attract equity. No, I mean, I definitely, get the Suahasil said about green bonds, SDG bonds, the sustainable development bonds. Those are bonds. Those are loans. Those have to be repaid. That's the difference on Sovereign Wealth Fund would attract equity into the country. So this equity would stimulate the economic growth and as well as the job creation. Now, the question is, what would be the sector for INA to invest alongside with foreign investment or foreign investors? In this case, could be institution, definitely. There are areas where, let's say, energy, renewable energy, are area where international investors would like to invest in renewable energy, and Indonesia have the largest geothermal potentials. So that's one of the examples. And also plan to develop, like what Pak Sua mentioned, the largest contributor of carbon emission is really the energy sector because of coal and diesel fuel has to be converted into renewable energies. And those are the ones that could be attractive for foreign investment. So to answer, or to start with the how to collaborate US and Indonesia develop in the direction of the net zero emission, the sector that were relevant most for investment in direct investment, for INA, for example, we welcome so much foreign direct investment into the renewable energy sectors, or could also be waste to power energy. imagine, you know, we live in Jakarta. I mean, at least I live in Jakarta. I mean, most people are in this Zoom, are in Jakarta. Jakarta every day contribute or produce almost 8,000 ton waste. How do we manage or mitigate that, you know, in terms of solving the problem of waste? And there are one or two today that was developing waste to power energy. And that is really a good process to contribute or collaborate in the context of reducing carbon emission. So I could explain more on Indonesia's sovereign wealth fund version and the difference with any other over 100 sovereign wealth funds in the world. And in fact, with Douglas, of course, you know, Douglas and Pak Jaya and other panelists in this forum, I think Douglas and the U.S. and Indonesian government have signed also some, initial understanding between the two countries with respect to the Indonesia Sovereign Wealth Fund. I think that's as a starting, Andini. Thank you for the time.
Okay, Pak Jaya, you are an advocate for renewable energy. You're in that industry, so you know better. How can we level up this collaboration between the US and Indonesia?
Yeah, I'd love to answer that. Thank you, Andini. Thank you, Chief Jimmy, for giving us the opportunity today. I congratulate ALUMNAS, fellow ALUMNASian, under Chief Jimmy leadership, that we are now not only, we are now organizing a webinar, but what we are aiming actually is to be a mover and shaker of this country towards net zero carbon 2060, which is that's our target. So I'm coming from private sector, so I'm not a government officials. I never worked for the government, so you can say that I'm a non-state actor. I work on the ground. I meet people on the ground about the problem, challenges, opportunity that exists on the ground, not only in Jakarta or even in Java Island, but also in remote island all over Indonesia. My first project is in the Mentawai Island off the coast of West Sumatra. We got a big support from US government on that project through the MCC. Thank you very much, Ms. Lien and Doug, representing the US taxpayer, of helping us with the grant for that project, which actually replacing diesel gensets with 100% renewable energy. So that project has been inaugurated by Minister of Development Agency, Bappenas, back in 2019. So the private sector in Indonesia has huge challenge here, not only about the funding, but also capacity building and technology. So this is something that we hope that developed countries like US, European countries, Japan, and other countries all over the world to see and share not only the technology, but also the knowledge on how to develop this renewable energy, that not only that it will transition from fossil fuel to clean energy, but also how we are going to grow the economic and prosperity on the ground, because we are still a developing country. As you know, our electricity consumption per capita is only about 1,000 kilowatt hour per year. United States around 8,000. So we are 1/8. And then even compared to our neighboring countries like Malaysia, Thailand, we don't compare to Singapore because Singapore is much more advanced. But even compared to Vietnam, we're still lag behind. Vietnam is about 2,000 kilowatt hour per capita per year. So what does it mean? It means that we're still having a lot to catch up. So it's not only about energy transition that is important for us, but how we are growing our economy, not only in Java, but also in all the other islands. We are the biggest archipelago in the world. we cannot just copy and paste the solution in other country and just put it here. We have to build our own model and help convince other countries to bring in the funding, to bring in the technology, to bring in the knowledge, so we can combine together all our effort and build our own model and grow from that. So I think that's important. The private sector here in Indonesia is struggling because it's different than other country. Here in Indonesia, you cannot separate the state from all the electricity sector, forestry, and other land use, or we call it FOLU sector, because the state control a lot of things. Like PLN has monopoly in Indonesia. So anywhere in Indonesia, you have to buy electricity from PLN. For example, if I generate electricity in the middle of the jungle, I cannot sell it to the population, to the local population. I have to go through PLN. And PLN has a fixed tariff anywhere in Indonesia. So it's only 3 cents per kilowatt hour for the low income families, which is a way that the government helping the poor family. It's a good thing, but something strange happen when you do that. It's no matter what PLN generate in terms of the source of fuel, government will have to pay for the gap, which is quite substantial. Like diesel in the remote island will cost about 30 cents, up to 40 cents per kilowatt hour. And they only sell it for 3 cents. Imagine the government will have to subsidize huge amount, almost 90%. So this is our situation, which is quite unique. I don't think that kind of situation exists in US or any other country in the world, but that's our system now. We are not gonna just change that system overnight. But what I'm trying to say is we have to work with the system, and no matter about who's going to control the distribution of electricity to all the population all over Indonesia, the private sector will have to work with the PLN, and I think the DFC and US government have to understand that this is the system that we have in Indonesia. That's just one sector. Maybe we can go through all other sector, transportation, buildings, and everything. It's not enough just private sector getting the funding from overseas, but also the government of Indonesia will have to make this environment or the business environment more conducive. Thank you.
Talking about your industry, renewable energy, and then I'll pass on to Doug and Sandy regarding this. How can we work together, let's say with DFC and then the US government? We know that we have the potentials to develop more of the renewable energy here, but as Pasua said, we still need international cooperation to execute that. So from your point of view, what can be done?
Yes, well, bring us the funding. We understand that there are different kind of funding, not only grant, but also there's equity and also debt for long-term debt, and private sector in Indonesia will be ready to take up that challenge. And PLN just announced recently that they would like to replace 2,000 megawatt of diesel gensets all over Indonesia with local renewable energy sources. That's require about $6 billion, $5 to $6 billion of new investment. Of course, it cannot come from Indonesia. I mean, the private sector in Indonesia, without the support of international finance community, won't make it happen. But the 2,000 megawatt of diesel genset replacement is only a small part. If we are going to catch up with other countries to achieve 4,000 kilowatt hour per capita, we might need 10,000 megawatt of diesel genset replacement.
Okay, I'll pass on to you, Doug and Sandy.
Perfect. I agree with everything that Pak Jaya is mentioning, and just to put some additional context or color into it, right? A couple studies, right, that catch my eye. One is IRENA's. There's a lot of figures out there, but IRENA puts it as Southeast Asia require 75 billion annually in through 2050 in clean energy investment alone, right? Just to and that's in power generation as well as transmission and distribution, which, I don't want to overcomplicate the conversation, but that is another area where a lot of support is needed. It's not just on generation and transitioning, from fossil fuels to renewables, but a lot of investment needs to go in actually how you manage and distribute that power efficiently and effectively. The other kind of key data point that helps guide our strategy, the Climate Policy Initiative recently put out a helpful paper just on the global landscape of climate finance. And there are both positive and negative trends in there, right? One is a significant amount of money. I think it reached over 600 billion alone in 2020 of investment. That's both public and private going towards climate finance. And that's significant growth. But actually, growth has actually slowed in the past year. Where we're seeing some positives in terms of breaking that number apart is when you kind of break that down between mitigation and adaptation. And this is key to DFC's strategy globally and in particular in Indonesia. DFC has supported mitigating climate investments for quite a while. And what do I mean by that? Projects roughly that help reduce emissions. So renewable power is a perfect example of that. But we are seeing, some maturity in that market and a greater participation of the private sector in investing in renewable energy. So while the DFC will continue to support renewable energy and projects such as those being spearheaded by Pak Jaya and others, we're also very focused on adaptation. So how are we, providing financing and helping catalyze private sector participation in projects that make Indonesia more resilient to the anticipated effects of climate change. So what does that mean? It's an example would be weather forecasting technology. It includes, in terms of food security, varieties of rice, right, that are more drought resistant, and it means support for mangrove and reforestation. So there's kind of a wide variety of opportunities for us to collaborate and support investment in Indonesia. The question was specifically on how to collaborate, right? And I want to touch on that a little bit because DFC does collaborate in a number of different ways. And I think it's important just in terms of understanding DFC, how do we collaborate? Well, how do we differentiate between different forms of collaboration? On the actual project development side, right, we collaborate with the implementing party, the developer, the investor, and that is where our mandate is limited to supporting private sector. So we want to see basically the participants who are effectively taking on substantial risk in many cases, putting equity at risk to design and develop a project, and DFC can step in and help scale that and implement the project. We also collaborate with the entities that are actually catalyzing that investment, and whether that be through, for international investors, political risk insurance to help overcome a specific risk with entering a new market, for instance. But it's also providing long-term financing that takes into consideration the seasonality and variability of renewable energy, and the time needed to not only construct but stabilize operations for a overall sustainable project that can stand on its own. So, with that, I just want to highlight, we have this concept of additionality. And what that means is we are not meant to displace private capital that is otherwise willing and able to invest in these projects. We're meant to catalyze it. We are meant to go where the private sector is less willing or unable to go alone. Jaya mentioning renewable energy and the displacement of diesel, I think is low-hanging fruit that we absolutely need to focus on in Indonesia. And I think it ticks off a number of boxes, right? And in terms of stakeholders, right? So PLN has currently raised, key issues for them is their own financial sustainability. And how do we reduce costs for power generation, not only for consumers, but for the utility itself, right? Diesel is not only incredibly inefficient, but it's incredibly expensive. So finding renewable solutions that can help reduce costs, reduce emissions, improve grid stability are all significant priorities for us. And we're looking to partner with the private stakeholders that are leading the charge and helping develop those projects. I'll leave it there for right now.
Right. And also, this is related to our discussion. One question is about, how about electric cars? Will it be something that DFC consider?
It absolutely falls into the sector of climate focused transactions, and we would love to get involved. There's a lot of answers to that, right? Because there's a whole supply chain, right, that really needs to be developed in order to supply the EV market, and we're focused really kind of throughout both the upstream and downstream components that ultimately deliver EVs. So yes.
There you go, Sandy.
Yes, thank you. And I agree with my colleagues Doug and Jaya and Cyril and everyone that has spoken. I think as a diplomat and my focus being on policy issues, I am less well versed in the issues of finance and whatnot. But I can say on the policy side, it is true that without a doubt on the there are real challenges to the transition to greater climate ambition, and that and it is something that we need to act collectively. And I will just sort of talk about the elephant in the room right now when it comes to climate finance, which is that in 2009, the developed countries, America being one of them, promised to mobilize $100 billion a year for 5 years, starting from 2020, to help developing nations with their climate ambition, whether it is transition to renewable energies or not. And to date, and as the OECD report published recently indicated, we are behind on that target. However, I won't note that, even had, hypothetically speaking, even if all the developed countries had kept to their promise, the amount of money that's promised is nowhere near, will never be near the amount of scope that is needed to fully implement the programs or the projects under consideration. I mean, just in Indonesia alone, we are talking about in scopes of like trillions of dollars, and not to mention there are other countries in the world that all are in similar situations, right? So there is no way that just depending on public sector multilateral funds, it will be enough to meet the needs of whether it's in transition in Indonesia or other countries. So the good news on that though is that we are seeing large and growing volume of capital from sovereign wealth fund or pension funds that are interested in investing. And so then that comes back then to what I was saying, that it becomes an issue of policies, right? Private capital is going to go after where they can make the money and get the best return for their investment. And so what that means is that countries will need to have the best policies in place to attract the private capital, right? Countries all over the world that are in the situation will be that have the best policy, and it's not just policy related to environment. We're now talking about sort of whole of government, whether it is rule of law, corporate tax rates, whether we're talking about bankruptcy laws or investment policy, corruptions, those are the things that private investors look to when they're deciding where they're going to put the money. And so countries that have those in place are in the best suited positions. And so, and then so like specifically coming back to Indonesia, I know I think it was a really good positive movement that I think it was a couple weeks ago or last month that the PLN issued its RUPTL, which sets out sort of the 10-year outlook on where it wants to go, and that provides a comfort level and security and stability for investors. But also, things that are still out there that could be done would be the presidential decree on renewable energy and the renewable energy law. And so getting those published will help provide further clarity for investors on what type of renewable projects that would be most profitable for them. So those are the kind of issues that from a policy perspective that we engage on and push for.
Okay, so help us to understand better, Sandy, since as an outsider of the US politics, you mentioned policies, and also what I'm very curious about with what's going on domestically in the US, can it also be translated that you will have a different approach when it comes to like partnerships, collaborations, when it comes to fighting climate change with other countries? Because domestically, it's sort of like it's dead, right? So how will be the approach be internationally?
Right. I mean, I think for me that there is no going back, right? And we can see that in short order, we have gone from talking, whether it's US domestically and internationally, from this issue being a climate issue or, to a climate challenge, to a climate crisis. And I think at least, currently with President Biden being in office, from day one, President Biden has taken sort of decisive domestic climate action. And he has implemented several policies and goals for the United States, whether it is, at the national security level, right? This is now an issue of national security for the United States. And this will have trickle-down impact on how each ministry or agency within the US look at the work that they are tasked to do and the climate component involved in it. So for example, whether it's the DOD, the Department of Treasury, the USTR, Commerce, or even Department of Justice, each and every single agency in the United States is now focused on how climate will impact our domestic agency actions. Just even looking at the COP26, which is sort of the impetus for this event today, we have over 12 cabinet secretaries that will be going along with President Biden to COP, to Glasgow, to have these discussions with relevant counterparts. And I think this shows that, for the United States domestically, this is a issue that is not just something that we're looking at for, as part of our international engagement. It is something that we are tackling both at home and, abroad. Over.
All right, Pak Cyril, how can we're talking about as our sovereign wealth fund, INA. Is it possible if INA can also look into investment in renewable energy sector? We have Pak Jaya here. So, or any other industries that can drive the climate actions in Indonesia?
Thank you. Very good questions, Andini. So as again, INA as a sovereign wealth fund is an investor. Excuse me. Is an investor, and it's equipped with $5 billion equivalent, of course, 75 trillion rupiah from the government budget. So sovereign wealth fund has money. but that's not enough for all that just mentioned, you know. So we need to co-invest alongside with international investors for developing Indonesia renewable energy or any other needs. So the idea, the model is that international investor, let's say, invest in Indonesia for developing renewable energy power plant. Let's take a hypothetical situation. And that has a purchasing power agreement for 25 years or 30 years. The question is asked by the international investors, whom am I partnering with for 30 years? Will my partner be still there? I mean, so that's the question. And the existence, the presence of sovereign wealth fund Indonesia version would actually co-invest alongside with them to stay alongside with for 30 years. So that's the idea. So there is a comfort level from international perspective for developing infrastructures. Toll road, for example, could be 40 years and 50 years. So, and the type of fund is equity. It's not a loan. It's not bonds. It's not credits. It's equity. So the nature is different. So INA, Indonesia Sovereign Wealth Fund, is really investor. So there's a risk profile, risk element to it, alongside with the international investors, and feel the pulse of investment performance. You're talking about investment is really always good plan. I've never seen bad plan. Always be a good plan. But performance mostly deviate from the plan. And you have to mitigate and recover quickly to make alongside, you know, meeting the target. So that's INA. Now, how INA is actually governed or structures. In the law, it's very clear. There are two board systems. The board supervisory where I'm in with the other three independent professionals, and the other two are chaired by Minister of Finance. And the other one is Minister of State Enterprise. So the member of Supervisory Board of INA, there are 5 members, chaired by Minister of Finance, and there is a Minister of State Enterprise, and 3 independent professionals from private sectors. So that's the Supervisory Board, just setting up the policy and governance and setting up the rule, including appointing the directors. Director comes from private sectors, experience in making investment. So we have 5 directors today, chaired by Dr. Rida Wirakusuma, that actually he used to be a CEO of banks, also used to be with KKR, investment company from the US, and supported, and the other 4 members are also professionals. And to select the investment and partners, so Doc mentioned about investor from the US, for example, we could explore some international investors, like responding the first question, how to collaborate. Look at US investors who would like to explore the renewable energy in Indonesia. Let's say Jaya, give an example on the island, but the size, let's say the size could be bigger, the scale could be bigger, investment ticket size could be bigger. But of course, the challenge, as you said, Pak Jaya, the tariff is standardized nationwide, except there are certain region like Batam or East Kalimantan, there's certain area that can set their own tariff. But of course, the question whether the renewable cost structure with some tariff set would still be able to pay by PLN budget and the whole finance PLN financial capability. So that's of course another gap that has to be considered very well. And the question, to what extent the government also in this case mix with the international investors, mix with this Indonesia Sovereign Wealth Fund, mix with maybe impact fund that would like to see some impact development on certain areas that targeting a little bit lower rate of return, because equity investor would expect a return, right? But a lower rate of return, not a private equity one that targeting 25% rate of return per year. So that could be a mixed equity funding, as Pak Jaya mentioned, how to actually fix one of the problem on financing. Technology comes maybe from international investor that mostly Europe could also be very, advanced on that part. Of course, US as well. So I think that would increase the capability, and the starting point to collaborate is really attract foreign investor, in this case US, like, of course Doc and Sandy have access and good contact with the US investors, and inform them there are huge opportunity, and renewable, actually the huge investment is really geothermal. And geothermal, of course, has to have a minimum size of energy produced, or else the variable income would not cover the fixed cost. But solar panel could be flexible, and also any other renewable energy. So I think that would be the starting exporting points. As of course, as well, waste to energy could be the options. So I think that's the INA position. We are prepared with $5 billion co-invest alongside with international investors on certain sectors. Today we have 17 projects pipeline to invest, and total could be about 20 billion size of investment value. 5 billion from INA, less than that, of course, and then the other international investors. So we are busy in the last 1 year, appointed by the President Jokowi in January for the Board of Supervisors. February, we appointed the Board of Directors, and couple signing documents, memorandum of understanding with Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, for example, with the Canadian pension fund, with the Dutch Holland pension fund, on that for different sectors. That is more for the toll road, for example. So there are toll roads, there are seaports, container, there are airports, there are healthcare in terms of hospital, as well as drugs, pharmaceutical products. There's also digital telecommunication infrastructure, of course, definitely renewable sectors. Yeah, thank you, Andini.
Very well. Pak Jaya, you can comment, or even like all the speakers, I invite you to even ask questions to all the other speakers. Please, let's just make it lightly. It's is it a Wednesday now? I even forgot the day. This is a Thursday, so it's getting towards the weekend. We need some warm up, guys. Seriously. Okay.
The good thing about
Pak Jaya.
the good thing about Thursdays, we don't need to worry about the Soljum, right?
Yeah, sure. Although we do need to have lunch.
Yeah,
so.
I have lunch next to me, actually. All right. Anyway, Pak Cyril, to be honest with you, renewable energy is probably the most attractive investment for your organization. I'm saying that from my own experience. You can have IRR more than 15%. So it's a good investment for you. I'm trying to sell this, this sector to you, okay? But the other thing, Pak Cyril, the more important thing about renewable energy, especially in underdeveloped regions, like in eastern part of Indonesia, because now I'm very active in Nusa Tenggara Timur, in Timor Island, it will bring prosperity, Pak. The economic rate of return. So there's IRR, that's good for us, for the private sector and investor and financial bankings. But the community, we are starting with a very low income community. Some of their electricity consumption is less than 200 kilowatt hour per capita per year. That's about the level of sub-Saharan African countries, Pak. Okay, so we are targeting people who doesn't have all the modernization that we are enjoying here. They don't have Zoom. They don't have even a smartphone. They don't have all the convenience we have. because they don't have electricity like we do. So 200 kilowatt hour per capita, that's only about for lighting. So what we need to work together, and also with our cooperation partner here in United States, DFC, USAID, MCC, United States government, is to target projects that have multiplier effect. It's not only about IRR that we are focusing on. It's about economic rate of return also, and about greenhouse gas emission reduction. If we help restore the land that is critical without our project, then it's a good thing. It's a bonus. Then we have to think about beyond just energy transition. We have to think about economic prosperity for all the locals. We have to think about how we absorb carbon from the atmosphere. And we have plenty of methods to do that. We can reforest the land, we can restore the land, we can grow mangrove, we can grow seagrasses all over Indonesia.
So, Pak Jaya, you're saying that we need to see the long-term effect.
Andini, what I'm saying is that renewable energy can be more than just energy transition itself. It can be economic drivers for the locals. So we don't need to take money from our state budget to alleviate poverty. If many of diesel gensets all over Indonesia is replaced with renewable energy, my method is to combine all the renewable energy, not just biomass, but also biomass combined with solar, combined with wind, combined with hydro. We use what is the biggest potential for that location. We are working with the nature. We are not working against the nature. We are working with the nature. Private sector understand that how to combine all the factors, not just thinking about the project, but also the impact to the locals, the impacts to the economy, the impacts to the environment protection. So I think this is something that we would like to promote more in Glasgow. I'm going to Glasgow, by the way, tomorrow, Pak. I hope I can meet the US counterpart while I'm in Glasgow, because we're doing a session in Pavilion Indonesia on November 3rd. We will be with the CEO of PLN in our session, and also Deputy Minister, Coordinating Minister of Maritime will be there. Professor Bambang Brojo will give keynote, because Bambang Brojo is now a commissioner of Tobabara, one of the biggest power plant developer company in Indonesia. And what we are going to discuss there is that Indonesia is quite unique. You cannot bring in the model from other countries and impose to Indonesia. Indonesia has their own challenges, it has own opportunity, and we are discussing about that. And then the second session is I will be speaking also in the Global Landscape Forum. I'm probably the only Indonesian delegate in the Global Landscape Forum that's organized by C4, Center for International Forestry Research. What we are promoting is about growing bamboo and other type of plant to help absorb carbon. So we can get the money from the carbon offset, not only from the government, but also corporations. Corporations all over the world, Microsoft, Google, other companies need carbon offset, and we can provide that. Thank you.
Can I follow one? Actually,
go ahead.
just to highlight
Pak Jaya has been pitching to you and Cyril.
No, yeah, just to touch on a comment made. Why the focus on climate aligned transactions, right? I mean, obviously it fits into a broader global efforts, right, to reduce emissions with a strong focus on the Paris Accord and the 1.5 degrees Celsius target. But a point that Pak Jaya does raise is we see the extraordinary opportunity focusing on climate aligned transactions, what that presents for economic revitalization and equity, right, through job creation, healthier communities, the dismantling of even gender inequities, and driving forward inclusive growth, right? So we have really both the the high level, I call it the micro level objectives in supporting attractive investments that hit key targets for the country and for some of these broader climate aligned objectives, right? But in parallel with that is recognition of the knock-on effects that these projects have on local communities and ultimately for broader economic growth. The other point that I just wanted to touch on, which comes down to the IRR topic, right? Without a doubt, right? The projects that are positioned to move forward expeditiously are those where the resource has been determined to be bankable and that the rate of return for the investment is well worth the time and the resources and the capital to see that project move forward. A big question mark of that is obviously the tariff rate that goes along with it.
Yeah.
And Sandy mentioned the issuance of the RUPTL, which was a fantastic milestone, I would say, in seeing a lot of these, in facilitating the movement forward on a lot of these projects. Embedded in that, we're focusing on what some of the target COD dates, right? So the dates when projects need to reach commissioning, particularly focused on some of those on the earlier end, right? 2025, 2026. Those projects need to start like now. And there are a lot of shovel-ready projects that are ready to move forward. And so we are very focused on how the projects identify, how the capacity identified in the RUPTL is now procured out to the investors that have already put capital at risk in identifying the resource, identifying land, and like I said, getting projects to basically shovel-ready status where all they are waiting on is the award and then the ability to negotiate the PPA and ultimately the tariff rate with PLN. So that's where we're very focused. As we look further east into some of these communities that Jaya is raising, I think we need to be realistic with the fact that there's going to need to be support, both state provided as well as through philanthropic organizations in closing the gap between the levelized cost of energy. So basically the cost to develop the project over the lifetime of the asset with the ability to pay, right? So, the tariff rate, not only is it inefficient to look at it as basically a set rate, across the country, but to take into consideration the cost of development naturally means that the tariff rate for those projects are going to be higher. And so the question will come in: how do you provide for a rate of return that is attractive enough to develop that project, while also taking into consideration the local community's ability to actually pay that rate, right? So that they do get to enjoy the benefits of being connected to reliable power. So just wanted to end it there.
Mm-hmm. Cyril, you want to add something?
Yeah, I guess that's a very relevant point. The issue on, of course, rate of return as well as ability to pay, and I think that's, of course, from investor perspective, is very much relevant. Again, investor is searching for profit, and of course depends on what model that they adopt. A pension fund would be different than, again, short-term, horizon investors. So again, on renewable sectors, even different in terms of size. For solar, for waste to energy, for geothermal, that would be different as well in terms of return, in terms of ticket size of investment, and of course the risk profile. So again, Pak Jaya, for example, or Douglas, for example, if we are talking about geothermal, is a big project, and that's one of the things that if you look at state enterprise today, they do have a geothermal assets, and that would be area, for example, for exploring ideas, but huge amount meaning that over could be 50, $100 million US ticket size. But for solar panel, it of course different size of the kilowatt peak for the solar panel. Now, the other area actually, what is important, I saw questions on the chat box on questions whether what's the difference between sovereign wealth fund Indonesia and BKPM.
Ini singkat aja ya Pak ya. Ini singkat aja karena we're getting towards the end.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. I think the difference simple that sovereign wealth fund is investor, BKPM is not investor. BKPM is organizing the administration of investors in Indonesia. I think that's the clear distinction between the two.
Right. Yeah, I know that you can answer it to the person directly. That's why I don't read it out loud.
I see.
Okay. This is the last question and a closing from all of you, starting from Sandy and then Douglas, Pak Cyril, and then Pak Jaya. You can conclude. What can we hope from COP26? Sandy, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for that. And actually, that was what I was going to say anyway, so this is perfect. So I think before we close, I wanted to sort of outline for the group today the 4 main objectives that the United States have going into Glasgow. First, as sort of all the panelists and everyone, any experts that's talking about this issue of climate change is talking about. Number one, we want to, in Glasgow, achieve substantial progress towards keeping the goal of limiting global warming to less than 1.5 degrees Celsius. So that is sort of the overarching goal in all of our negotiations going into Glasgow, is that we want to limit global warming to less than 1.5 degrees Celsius. Second, we want to send a clear signal to the parties to the Paris Agreement that the United States is committed to continue to strengthen climate ambition during this decisive decade. And I think anybody who has listened to our Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, John Kerry, speak in recent weeks and months, he continued to stress that this is the decisive decade. And the reason is because, if we are talking about net zero by 2050, right, then this is the decade in which policy needs to be enacted, implemented, created, so that during the next decade, we can put those policies into place so that we can achieve the targeted net zero goals by 2050. So this is a decisive decade. And number 3, our goal for Glasgow is to demonstrate that our own United States commitment to national and global climate action. And so over the course of our time in Glasgow at COP, the United States will launch a whole range of new initiatives and partnership with other countries and with the private sector to mobilize concrete action in key areas, including methane. And on that note, I need to give a shout out to the government of Indonesia, who was one of the first and early adopters of the Global Methane Pledge, which we will formally launch in COP. But President Jokowi already during the Major Economies Forum in September pledged that that Indonesia will join the Global Methane Pledge. And methane, actually, for those, and I might be getting a little bit weedy, but I think this group probably likes that. Methane, for those you who do not know, contribute to 12.6%, so almost 13% of Indonesia's greenhouse gas emissions comes from methane. So by signing the Global Methane Pledge, Indonesia is pledging to reduce its methane emissions by 30% by 2030. And so there are other initiatives that we will be launching during COP that will demonstrate sort of the U.S. Commitment to this issue, both domestically and internationally. And then finally, the 4th objective for the United States going into COP is to complete what we call the Paris Rulebook, i.e. the remaining guidelines that will elaborate sort of the agreement. And one of the objectives under the Paris Rulebook includes outstanding work on Paris Agreement's common reporting system to promote transparency by all countries, and adopt decisions on the carbon markets. I know that is an issue that I've heard many of the speakers ask about and discuss today, sort of the creation of a carbon market to trade carbon credits, of which Indonesia has a huge resource of carbon credits, but setting those rules so that we can establish a market for trading those. So those are, and so creating the rules and regulations for those will be another objectives for the United States during COP. So those are the 4 objectives for the US going into COP. Over.
Very well. Doug?
Oh, Sandy put it well. I not too much to add on to that, but to kind of tie back to the Vice Minister's comments that the road doesn't end at Glasgow, right? And looking forward to exciting 2 years ahead, both in leadership positions for Indonesia, both at the G20 and then for ASEAN after that, right? And doing what DFC can support to help showcase really what is possible in driving sustainable development in Indonesia, and working with great partners like Cyril and the Indonesian Investment Authority. It's colleagues over at PTSMI. It's supporting projects like Jaya and others are promoting. And I'd like to see, your question is coming out of it. I'd like to see a clear procurement process that helps getting some of these projects identified in the RUPTL moving. Thank you.
Cyril.
Yeah, thank you. I guess it's expectation is really RUPTL. It's really an effort to provide the electricity activities really led by PLN would indeed be materialized and more detailed action plan how to do it, how to deliver it. Of course, they are based on assumptions like the growth of the electricity sales going to be like 6.4%. For example, of course, the assumptions that going to increase the generations power like 15.4 gigawatt. But I think what most important is how to reduce the coal contributing that 55% of the electricity. And expectation is the renewable energy would contribute, let's say 23 to 24% by then, 2028, 2030. So how the executions to do it, where we know the renewable energy in general would have a higher cost structure, and that would be an issue to mitigate, and that's the challenging portion. Despite for solar renewable energy technology would drive the price down, except for the battery may still be a bit high, but other than that, could be very competitive. So I think all in short, the expectation for 26 COP in Glasgow would strengthen the commitment to realize the target for reducing the carbon emission.
And last but not least, Pak Jaya.
Thank you, Andini. So my expectation is simple. We need to listen to each other more rather than just imposing policies to from both sides. Developed countries to developing countries, or developing countries to developed countries, just demanding, but more about bringing their own effort, to show their own effort about greenhouse gas emission reduction in their countries. Now, Indonesia and especially Indonesia and US, we are the two, not the biggest, but number 2 and number 3 biggest democracy in the world. Why it's important? It means that there's always going to be a political dynamic in Indonesia and US. But we need to really trust each other, that both countries will pull its own weight to help the whole world to achieve net zero carbon emission by 2050. And that's very important. And Indonesia, not only that Indonesia is fourth biggest country in the world in terms of population, but we are also representing developing countries this year. As a presidency of a G20 summit will be in Indonesia. And then after that, we are also representing ASEAN. So when developing countries is the majority of population in the world still live in the developing countries, it means that we are representing the majority of the population in the world in G20. And in ASEAN, we are representing 600 million people in ASEAN. So we are not only representing 300 million people, we are representing 600 million people that still need economic prosperity, still need recovering from the pandemic, still need about having a good environment where they live, not only in the cities but also in the all over the archipelago, in the small islands, in the middle of the jungle, anywhere where they live. They deserve to have a good life. They deserve to have environment that can sustain life. So I guess this COP26 will bring another hope, because we're just coming out from pandemic. We're going to meet people face to face. I think we should grow trust to each other, because we have to collaborate. We cannot, no country can solve this problem by their own. We have to collaborate, and we need to listen more. Thank you.
I like that, to listen more, to in order if we want to speak out more, right? So, and not only we are anticipating the COP26, but we are also expecting the G20, where Indonesia is the presidency, and climate change will be the agenda for the upcoming G20. Not only Indonesia and the US, but also China will be there. And China is sort of the front runner now in climate change. And they're also partnering up with countries such as Indonesia to combat climate change. So I hope the US will show its strength, right, in terms of partnering up with us for to combat climate change. Thank you very much to all the speakers. Now, like as a good Indonesian, we need to take pictures at the end of an event, right? So yes, we will take pictures on my cue. Boleh dibagi ininya layarnya jadi bagi 5 gitu panitia, and then we'll take pictures together, all the speakers. Silakan. Jadi spotlightnya jangan hanya di Pak Cyril. Okay, we'll take picture. 3, 2, 1. Satu lagi. 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you to all the speakers for the insights, and hopefully will impacting others and berfaedah buat banyak orang. And I will give the floor as a closing remarks to my dear friend Bapak Ari Satria, Chairman of ALUMNAS Partnership Committee. Pak Ari, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Andini. I hope you can hear my voice. First and foremost, in my capacity as a part of the organizer of this event, allow me on behalf of the alumnus to express our appreciation to distinguished speakers and also the panelists for their valuable contribution to our discussion today on Indonesia and US cooperation on climate change, which is timely in the event of the upcoming COP26 conference at the Glasgow. My deepest gratitude also goes to all who attended the webinar. I see more than 100 people are watching our webinar today who attended and helped to make it such a successful event. A special thanks to our moderator, Andini, who have been extremely cooperative, and my fellow alumnation for their priceless contribution and for running a smooth event. Alumni strive to become a productive member of Indonesian society, and we believe that it is important to bring together diverse group of people coming from different industries, academic experts, government representatives, and stakeholders to discuss important and many times challenges issues that Indonesia are facing, in hopes to provide a deeper understanding of the issues to the society and provide inputs on policy formulation, and also build stronger cooperation among us. I believe that today's webinar have met those expectations. Hearing and learning from speakers, panelists, as well as the audience has educated me and all of us here on a number of important issues related to renewable energy and climate change in Indonesia, including the concept and implementation of the net zero carbon and related issues. I'm certain that the takeaways from this webinar will deepen our thinking and stimulate future works in this area, including finding technological breakthrough, formulating a balanced development strategy with environmental protection, and conservation strategy, and how we all can collaborate both within our nation and between Indonesia and the US. ALUMNAS will certainly look forward to working closely with the US Embassy in Jakarta, along with the US DFC, USAID, and other US development agencies. To end my closing, ALUMNAS will also like to invite all of you to participate in ALUMNAS upcoming programs, including the ALUMNAS Summit that Chief Jimmy already said earlier this morning, that will be held in November in a hybrid scheme, both online and offline, where in that Alumni Summit from the partnership committee, we're thinking to have some kind of MOU signing between alumnus and several entities, where you can find the information at our social media, and we look forward to expand our collaboration with all of you to build a better and prosperous Indonesia. Thank you again for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Thank you, Andini.
Thank you, Pari. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to all the people who already submitted their question. Mohon maaf tidak semuanya bisa disampaikan, dan terutama pertanyaan untuk keynote speaker, karena tugasnya keynote speaker tidak untuk menjawab pertanyaan-pertanyaan, tapi itu tugasnya dari speakers panelis. Terima kasih banyak Bapak Ibu sekalian, dan sampai jumpa di acara ALUMNAS berikutnya. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andini. Thank you.
Andini.